educational computer games, which I will not go over at all. But you may see stuff you know, may see stuff you don't know. But when I think about educational simulations and serious games, this is sort of the path that I think we have been on and continue to be on. And these slides will be available. So short sims, I sort of come up with this term, and I've been using it a lot. And I like how it sounds. It rolls off the tongue well. But it's a concept of these short interactive educational experiences that follow 7 design principles fairly closely. These 7, risk danger here. Okay, good. So most importantly, they build competence and conviction through player actions. These are things that players engage. They're quick and easy to use and are replayable from a student perspective, from a player perspective. They're quick to build and easy to update. That actually, easy to update is a really important part. I'm changed to highlighter. There, I can scribble better here. Quick to build, easy to update is really important because a lot of times I had clients who were very interested in interactive content, but were not willing to spend, and nor should they, 6 months or 9 months or something in order to build it. They wanted something measured in weeks, maybe short months, not in terms of significant fractions of years. But still use a rigorous underlying sim model, in a lot of cases become sims of sims, coexist with other educational content, collaborative, not directive leadership, so something that isn't yelling at or talking to the player, but kind of working with them. And again, the voice I like to think of as Jarvis from the Iron Man movies, or if you're over 45, Jeeves from Bertie Wooster. And then taking advantage of simple mechanics, almost like a word processor. Word processors are not very complicated. They're pretty complicated tools, but they're not overly complicated tools from which you can apply open-ended creativity. So that's sort of the notion of let's not tie ourselves down with super complicated authoring environments. Let's find those that work well, work smoothly, and allow us to be super creative if possible. So those are the basic short sim principles that I've come up with, and hopefully they'll evolve over time. That at least is a starting point. Questions or thoughts there? Can someone type one thing in the chat window just to make sure it works? Just type in a hi or something.
Clark, we have a number of questions in the questions pane. I'm not sure if we should be able to see that, I think. Can you confirm that you see the questions there?
There you go. Okay, excellent. Oh, good. I got lots of highs, hellos. You guys are so nice. Thank you. All right. All right, we have a ton of great questions. All right. That's fine. Sergey, can you read through those questions and share with me? I'm having a hard time. The window's a little small on my screen. Can you come up with some of the questions and then just ask them to me?
All right. So let's ad hoc this thing. So I'm not sure if all the questions are about this slide, but they're really good questions. I went through them. I love.
Start from the top.
All right. So time needed to develop as a scenario like probably the one that you've shared with us. So when you say quick to build, this particular scenario, how long?
This scenario was about 2 weeks from beginning to end, with a couple more hours to update the graphics at one point. And that's 2 weeks, not every hour of the time, but it's like half a day over the course of 2 weeks or something. So it's it's maybe about a week altogether.
All right, there is another question on basic building function and how to. I will actually take this question and suggest that we'll get in touch with you. We can do a personal demo, or we have a series of webinars on the how to. But the second part of the question is, have you encountered any problems in doing so? It's a dreaded question for me as the CEO of the company, but any problems there?
Not really. There have been a few times when BranchTrack has changed a bit of functionality that's made the screens change a little bit, but it's been very minor and very easy to replace and fix. Not even replace, just slight workarounds. So no, the answer is no. It's been a very seamless and easy process, and certainly easier than any other tool set that I've found.
Well, thank you. That's great. But the next couple of questions, I'll blend them into one. So can you please describe your design workflow, and do you write the scenario before creating it? And if you do it outside of BranchTrack, how do you do that? So a little bit about the process behind building, aside from just stringing things together in BranchTrack.
Fantastic. In terms of workflow, we'll sort of be going over here, Peter. So, and Peter Shea, by the way, asked the question, is a good friend and someone with whom I collaborate and bouncing off of all the time. So we'll spend a bit of the time going into this. Do you write the scenario before creating it? And the answer is really no, Lisa. And it's a great question, and it's one that's really important because I've had some clients who have been very, very insistent on sort of designing everything beforehand. It reminds me of sort of the old IBM programmers who wanted to plan out every last thing. And one of the real joys of BranchTrack, frankly, as a tool, is it's so much easier to write to create a minimally viable scenario, or even just a single walkthrough, and then go through it and then pull things out. It's like taffy, oh, let's add something here. Someone might have a question here, let's add it. So I'm a huge, it's almost like saying, I'm going to write a sentence, how many vowels do you need? I'm going to write a sentence, how many words are you going to use? And that's fine, except it's a lot more fun to just sort of write a sentence and then look at it and edit it and stuff. So I think that the spontaneity of being able to play with it is really, really important. Now, there's two kinds of audiences. One are sort of SMEs, and one are lawyers. And the lawyers want to see every last thing, and then I like to bring them in at the end of the process, not the beginning, because again, it's pretty easy to change things around. This is not BranchTrack is a very, very fluid tool. Again, more like a word processor, and you can change things incredibly quickly on the fly. And so it is easier, and this gets. And yes, I have figured out actually how to expand the window. I'm so stupid. And so it's that notion of creating it and then showing it to people. Same thing with subject matter experts, Teresa. It's you interview them and you ask questions like, what are the important things here? Where do people make common mistakes? Which is my favorite SME question. What don't people understand? And then it's a lot more fun to build it and then show it to them and say, okay, here's what I got. What do you think? And usually they're pretty impressed. It's a miserable process. It really is miserable to try to write out beforehand and plan every branch and show people the schematics and then have them review it. Because most of the time, if you have a team of people who are reviewing the text and reviewing the branches without playing it, guaranteed they're not going to understand what they're doing, and they're going to constrain your simulation or your sim to like one path with like 3 options, because that's what they can review. So it's really an awful practice if you want something that's interactive and fun and engaging to bring in to have them have too much review going on of the script, and because it's so fast, you might as well throw it in there and let people play it, and that's finally how they get it. Now, what you can do before you do art is a really good placeholder is you can have a single narrator saying, imagine a room that's oak covered and has a chandelier with candles on it. It's in this room that, so you can literally set the scene, and you can use the on-screen narrator to do more work than just the dialogue. If you want to not spend any money or time creating art assets initially, and then sort of doing it that way, and that actually may end up being what you stick with by the end of the process because it works really well. So there's a lot of reasons to want to create these things as fast as possible to show people. I'm going to move on now, but I have our place, and we're going to come back to it and answer more, because these are indeed great questions.
Yeah, all right, excellent. So I'll save a couple of questions for a little bit later in the presentation, and I also wanted to say that this problem that we always had with showing SMEs a schematic, not the ready-made playable thing, was exactly why I came up with the BranchTrack idea. So it's really awful when you show a huge flowchart to someone and they just don't get it, and you have to invest a lot of time into actually producing it before they understand it, and then they want to change everything. So there's a lot of waste in there. Well, unless you use BranchTrack, of course.
Yeah, and the worst case scenario is when someone says, I don't want to deal with all these branches. Let's just have one single path with maybe 3 questions that we ask along the way. So when people are, when SMEs or auditors or lawyers or something are looking at it before it's created, their natural response is to squeeze it as tightly as possible to make their jobs easier, which obviously creates pretty awful content. Okay, so this example I chose because it's not too complicated, but also not too simple either. So I thought it was a nice compromise. It was something I did for the Gates Foundation's work on open source textbooks, and sorry. Literally, it was going to be embedded content where there's going to be text, and it's going to be it is an open source textbook, and then people are going to read things and then have these sims be embedded in the context of the textbook itself, a la video, and not to replace video because video is wonderful, and not to replace text because text is wonderful, but to exist seamlessly alongside of it. And the subject for sims in general were to be used when the content was going to be hard to convey traditionally or was simply foundational to the later understanding. These are going to be Econ 101 textbooks, boo hiss. And so we wanted to use sims, again, where stuff was hard to understand and or where stuff was so foundational that if you didn't understand it, you really couldn't move on. And so one of the examples of the foundational content was the demand curve. So in terms of workflow, Peter, your question is the first thing to do is to understand the topic and the objectives for the sim. Those are very different things. The objectives for the sim is what do you want the sim to cover, and you really do want to nail this down pretty tightly. You can go crazy if it's too open-ended. So you really want to say, okay, what are the things that you want this sim to cover? Understanding the topic is the other side of it, the other side of the coin, and a much more open-ended kind of thing. When you really do want to understand the concept, one of my primary rules is every single good sim comes from a deep and profound knowledge of the content, and the more you understand it, the better it is. All the nuances, all the nitty-gritty, the more fun the sim's going to be. And a lot of times, content itself gets mushed because we're used to giving it as speeches or we're used to giving it as case studies, and so inherently you have to go below that surface and scratch at it and sort of get to the deeper issues behind it. In this case, it's a very easy example. We wanted students to learn the demand curve, and specifically, as one professor said, not to look at it as a static icon, but as something that moved and was a helpful tool, not just a pretty picture. So with that as a slight pause, I do want to go back to some of the answer a few more questions.
There's one question that I really want you to answer before we proceed with this, and
Excellent.
It's an excellent question.
Thank you so much.
You talk about simulations, as someone pointed out, in a kind of non-conventional sense, and this is actually my question as well. So we use scenarios and sims interchangeably. Is there any difference between the two? And a lot of people use simulations as in, sometimes software simulations and so on. So can you kind of talk about the terminology a little bit?
Sure. Terminology stinks. I mean, it's something we've been as if it's a big we, as if we all get together and have coffee or something. But I think it's something the quote-unquote industry has been wrestling with the right term for a very, very long time. There is no good answer. Some people love the term serious games. I never have. I don't like the term simulation, although I like the term educational simulation. It has a better context for it. The single term that I've been pushing for quite some time now is just the phrase sim, and it's short. It rolls off the tongue. It's a nice way of saying it. Battlestar Galactica had their Blood and Chrome DVD series, and they used the term sim to describe this kind of an interactive simulation. I felt that's a really personal accomplishment for me. I was very proud of that moment. So there is no right term and there is no perfect definition. I just think in terms of interactive content and learning by doing, and if it's that kind of thing where the user is driving the action and it's in a nonlinear way, then let's just call it a sim and move on. I don't think there ever is going to be a perfect term, nor necessarily should there be. And part of what I want to convince people of here is under this framework of sim or short sim, or even using a very specific tool like, say, BranchTrack, the amount of creativity is absolutely incredible. And so, think about the interactivity of the experience. What is the right thing to do, rather than the genre of a first-person shooter or a branching story or something. Because hopefully what I can convince you of is using this approach, this methodology that I'll be walking through today, the sky's the limit. You can do anything you want, and it's scary and wonderful and frustrating all at the same time. And that's actually a very good segue here. And Sergey, interrupt me again in about 3 minutes with the next question, please. So step two is sort of figure out the approach. And so you sit there saying, okay, I'm going to do one on a demand curve. What's it going to be? And one of the good, bad, scary, fun, exciting things is this going to be a lab? Is this going to be a toy? Okay, demand curve, is this going to be a little world? Am I going to create a microcosm? Am I going to take someone on a walk through the process? Okay, kids, the first thing you're going to do is this. Second thing you're going to do is this. Is this going to be an open-ended dialogue where you're talking to someone about demand curves? Is this going to be a guided application of a process? Is this going to be some kind of abstract or symbolic interaction? So that's a really, and again, beyond, I don't care what each of these are called. I'm happy to lump them under the giant umbrella of, see, look, a giant umbrella. Under the giant umbrella of let's just call it a sim and move on, so we almost don't restrain our thinking. And so in this case, it's like, okay, I want to do, and my first choice is always some kind of little toy, some kind of little sandbox. And so the question here again is, okay, if I'm going to do something on the demand curve, what's my interaction? What's my toy going to look like? And in this case, and that's a really hard part, by the way, this step from step two to coming up with sort of the analogy is really, really hard, because you want to make it fun, you want to make it engaging, you want to make it playful, you want to make it intuitive. One of the most important things is you don't want people to have to understand your way of looking at it. So, what's an engaging, what's a very intuitive way of presenting it. So coming up with the analogy, in this case, like, okay, this is going to be about food truck, and you're going to have a food truck, and you're going to impact you're going to create, first of all, create your own demand curve, and then second of all, be able to change it a little bit based on your actions. So kind of once you have that big analogy or the big thing, again, it can be any of these things. So and a thousand others. So there's so many different approaches you have, but in this case, I'm going to do a food truck. Once you do that, you start saying, okay, what's the interaction going to be like? And in this case, I decided on a couple of things. I wanted to have a fairly simple interface. I love simple, repetitive interfaces, so you don't have to think about them. Again, the analogy there is a computer game joystick, where the same button, the upper right button always says the same thing, moves you forward, or the joystick, or whatever. So the notion of simple interfaces is really key. Lower the price, raise the price. In this case, toggle, wait for the sun to come out, or put the sun back behind a cloud. So it's unrealistic in terms of what you're going to do, but it's those three things. It's all you can do. Those are the only three interactions you do. And then, like a mini-map in a first-person shooter, like a mini-map in a driving game, have the demand curve itself be a helpful tool. Really important. I didn't want the demand curve to be front and center. I wanted it almost to be like a cheat sheet. You wanted to pull the demand curve. You wanted to engage the demand curve in order to help you do something else. So that shift from saying, okay, class, here's a demand curve, to here's a different function, and the demand curve is there to help you. As much as possible, I like the primary content to be there to help you accomplish some other goal, especially when in the real world that's what it's designed to do. Okay, Sergey, next question, or anyone else?
All right, I have a question that kind of pertains to this. So we started talking about graphics a little bit. So there was a question on this narrator guy in your scenario, and I know you're using the same guy in a number of scenarios. Probably you like them. We have to expand that part. But so sometimes this narrator is there visually, and sometimes he's gone, but his voice stays. So do you have any comment on that? Like, why do you use it this way?
Um, so first of all, I love using the on. So um, the traditional branching story kind of has like this, like the scary narrator. Let's see if we can pull this up. Okay, that can work. Can you all see that?
Yep.
Okay, great. So in a traditional branching story, the narrator is a scary person who you have to convince, and you're selling at them, and they yell a lot, and they get really mad and stuff, and that's sort of the genre. So first of all, the first big aha is I like turning my main screen character into a coach who's there to help you, not some scary person who's there to yell at you or something. And so I just like that more. It's a calmer, more pleasant experience, in my opinion. So I like the coach there to help and talk you through it. I also love being able to harass the coach a little bit. So in this case, consider a food truck that is selling drinks. And one question, well, isn't that a beverage truck? And the answer is no. So the idea that you're kind of playing with the coach. The coach is not just there to yell at you and order you around, but you can hassle the coach. You can harass the coach a little bit. I think that's certainly how I want to play something and engage something and push back. And it also keeps the coach from. For me, again, I always think of Jarvis, or I always think of Iron Man's Jeeves character. People who are there, who know the rules, who have a sense of the rules, but are really there in a helper function. Um, and are there to explain the rules to you rather than do anything else. So that's really important. How often to go back and forth um, is a really good example. Hold on, let's see if I can pull this off. Yeah, okay. So when to show the coach versus not is a great example of of build what you can, and then see when you want more coach or see when you want less coach. So it's a real doing by flow approach.
Excellent. Thank you. While we're on the topic of coaching,
Yeah.
there's an excellent question about feedback. So the question is, please discuss your preference between providing immediate coaching feedback after a selection versus coaching at the end, knowing the specific pathway the user followed through points or something. So any
Sure.
comment on that?
Yeah, it's a fabulous question. And there's a bunch of sides to it. I think most importantly, I think you do want to show the extrinsic, actually, I'm this wrong. No, the intrinsic consequences rather than the extrinsic. So you want to show what happens if you do something rather than, tut tut, you shouldn't have done that, or yay, good job, you did that. So if I go into a customer meeting and I yell at the customer and do whatever, or I raise the prices too high or something, I want to show the natural consequences of that action. So it's not even a matter of oh, you're wrong, or oh, you're right, as much as saying if the price in this case of the drink goes up, you get less people in line. So as much as possible, um, I do want to show raise price, or raise the price. So as much as possible, here are customers waiting in line in your drink, and I'm going to raise the price by 50 cents. I lose customers. That's the natural consequence. By the way, I can show you that on the line. If I lower the price, I get more. If I raise it, I get more. I can lower. I can raise. And so it's not as it's less saying yes, you're right, or no, you're wrong. It's here's what happens if. So if you're talking about cybersecurity, it may even be, well, I put the thumb drive into the computer. Wrong one. I put the thumb drive into the computer. Yes, there's a tut-tut, you shouldn't do that. But more importantly, there's, oh, here's what happened. There was a virus in the thumb drive, and now it's in your server, and now it's in your mainframe, and now it's providing a portal to some other country to all your data. And so it's less about, you shouldn't have done that, or you should do it, and more about here's what happens when you do or do it. So I like giving both short-term feedback as much as possible in terms of consequences. Here's immediately what happens when that happens, and then also longer term in terms of here's a cumulative response of what you did. The really important thing about the cumulative response, I'm going to make 10 decisions and then get the reaction from those 10 decisions, is now you can almost create a sense of customization. I, who am playing this sim, can feel like I'm somewhere unique and different than other people have been. And so that giving people that sense of almost creativity inherently in a genre that does not seem very creative is a really important part as well. So trying to give people a pride of ownership. I solved a solution in a what feels like a unique way. Obviously not really unique, but it feels like a unique way, or at least a very personal way, I think is a very, very satisfying goal. So as much as you can have people be creative and feel like, and if you have 5 people who play the sim and then they go over to lunch and compare their results and have 5 very different experiences. I did an ice cream shop in one point, and depending on your actions, you might end up failing and going bankrupt, or you might be producing mass market chemical ice cream that tastes terrible but that sells well and has a high profit margin, or you might end up with a boutique series of Ben & Jerry's ice cream shops, or you might end up selling a super premium brand through a bunch of different channels. And these are all consequences of decisions that you make, and there's no, each one has its own trade-off. But there's less. It's less about right and wrong, even though there are right and wrongs, because that's the bankrupt. The bankrupt is wrong, but the bunch of good solutions that are possible, or even some mediocre solutions, I think is part of what makes these things fun. One thing we talked about early on, one of the key design concepts, is the notion of replayability, and sorry here. So one of the big ones is quick and easy to engage. It only takes 5 or 7 minutes, but also replayable. And so the more interesting conclusions you have, the more replayable it is. Okay.
So Clark, I have to throw another question at you. I'm sorry, but I have to, because it ties in really well. So the question is, how close should the scenario or simulation be resemble the reality? So obviously it can't mimic reality 100%, but how abstract or non-abstract should you be? Because you mentioned, the portal to another country when you find a flash thumbstick and so on. This is a little bit extreme, maybe, and a lot of people will not buy into that if they're playing. Maybe that's my concern. So any comment on how realistic these things should be?
I think it depends on the goal. I honestly believe a lot of content. I mean, there's very specific content. If you are taking apart a ratchet and or you're booting up the computer, or you're checking the oil for trace amounts of arsenic, whatever. I mean, there's some very, very specific lab stuff, in which case you want to be very, very specific. Because we live in a Google Wikipedia world, a lot of what I try to focus on teaching people is conviction, not just competence. Competence is how to do something, but conviction is why to do something. And so, if I'm teaching someone not to text while they're driving a train, as a random example, it's not, that's not even a how-to, that's a why not. Convince me by my, try to get me to do the wrong thing and then show me why it is the wrong thing. So in a lot of cases, you're teaching conviction, why something is important, as much as competence, how to do something. And so at the conviction level, you can be a little looser and a little more abstract, and have that work, versus at the competence, you do want to be very, very specific. I built one sim where, again, someone had to read over a form and find the problems or the flaws or whatever. In that case, the way a letter was shaped, for example, or the you might have to look at a field and find the error in that field, kind of thing. In which case, you want to be incredibly specific, and you can do that through BranchTrack as well. Through a couple of cool techniques, but it's so it depends. It depends on understanding the content itself. But I think oftentimes we're too. I mean, the worst place to learn how to fly is an F-16 cockpit. So you do want to figure out the right level for where the audience is and where you need to get them.
Thank you. Well, let's talk about visuals a little bit now.
Yeah, great. So in this case, what was sort of fun about this example was, so anyway, yeah, decided on food trucks. I use PowerPoint as my graphic engine, which is either a really, really stupid idea or a really good one, depending on how you look at it. I'm going to say it's a really good idea. But I know how to use PowerPoint really, really well because I'm a corporate geek. So, it's fun to be able to actually create full graphics and all the graphics that you need in PowerPoint, and then at some point I set my width to 10 and my height to 7.5, and then at some point you export them, and then you import them into BranchTrack, and it's an incredibly, and again, if you please play this in if you haven't afterwards, but it's a very satisfying experience. The graphics look good, they look professional, they look sharp. I use clip art, so I can turn things around very, very quickly. In this case, this was my first draft. And here's a line of people waiting for it, and this is all just assembled from clip art. What was really fun here is the price of drinks is 50 cents. As you raise the price, the number of people get smaller and smaller and smaller. The other fun thing I did here, and it's lower so you have demand shown by people. I can put little shadows under them. But they also, each of the people have their own little personalities. They didn't really go into this in any detail, but when the price goes up, you kind of lose the people who are less interested. You still have people who are really hot. As the price goes up, now you lose the kid. As the price goes up, you start losing just some of the thirsty people. You still have the person who's choking, and then you actually have a girlfriend and her beau that she's dragging to, and a couple of very rich people. As you raise the price too, now you lose the person who's choking because he can't afford it anymore. Now you have the girlfriend dragging along the boyfriend. The price goes up a little more. The girlfriend loses the boyfriend. The boyfriend's now out, so now the girlfriend's sad. And all of us left are the two people with a lot of money, and then you finally only have the one really rich person. So it's fun to be able to add some character and charm. And again, I never made this a point. I never talked about this in the sim, which is good because we ended up taking that out. But it is fun to try to make things have a little bit of charm and a little bit of engaging. The client. We then decided to change the graphics to do a sort of a 3D isomorphic look, which I really liked, and I had done for some other sims for them, and so they were very, and they just liked it a lot. So we went back to this format, which is absolutely fine with me. So it ended up looking like this, which I think is a very nice, slick, professional look and very engaging. So I was a little sad to lose out on the personalities. I couldn't quite fit them into this framework, but the effect was still a very satisfactory one, and it tied in line with a lot of the other sims that we sort of did for this same series. So and again, this is all done. This is done in PowerPoint. This is done with clip art, and it's amazing if you're good at it. Whatever graphic tool you like, you can use to create these. And again, you do end up creating a tremendous amount of, in this case, this is really important. These are 22 screens I built for the lab. So for the lab part of this sim, 22 screens, and it looks like this in PowerPoint, where everything's a little bit different. And if you do it right and fluidly, then people go from one screen to the other, thinking it's interactive, which it is to some degree, but having it feel very organic and fluid.
There's a trick question for you, Clark. So if you are using PowerPoint first, then aren't you planning it outside of BranchTrack first? So how do you go? Do you kind of create the branching scenario first, and then you start building the graphics, or you plan it somewhere outside of BranchTrack, build the graphics, then build out the BranchTrack? So can we kind of circle back to the workflow a little bit?
Yeah, I mean it's chicken or egg. If you're in some cases you might build out the whole BranchTrack story and put in words instead of graphics so people can review them. Other times I'm always afraid that people won't get it when I talk. So like I am here, in fact. So you can mock up the graphics in sort of ugly terms and then import them and then replace them with prettier graphics. In a lot of cases, in terms of coming up with the first big analogy. So when I actually start off trying to figure trying to figure out the whatever. It tends to be this screen, which is, what's the basic layout going to be, and that can be done using a pad of paper and pencil. I keep a little designer notebook with me. It could be on PowerPoint, trying different things and sort of wrestling with real estate, space, the space that you have, which is non-intuitive sometimes to figure out how to use the space well. So I don't think there's a right answer. I think there's, in a lot of cases, mocking up what it's going to look like is very satisfying. In all sim designs I've ever built, from incredibly complicated to incredibly easy, people freak out. The entire people who are paying for it freak out until they see a couple of screenshots, and then they're happy. And there's a moment before the screenshot and a moment after the screenshot. Before the screenshot, people are freaked out. After the screenshot, people are happy and contributing. So you do want to give them something to say, here's the basic analogy I've chosen, the metaphor, here's the basic interactivity, here's the basic feedback, and then that's when they get happy.
And here's a quick question from me regarding a couple of the questions. So how does the PowerPoint integrate with BranchTrack? Well, there's not much integration there, so essentially you save the images from PowerPoint, and then you just upload all of them at once, if you like, to BranchTrack, and then you just assign them to different scenes in whatever order you want them to be assigned. And also someone asked about changes.
Can I stop one second? Use the same slide number as the screen number. It'll save you lots of misery. So when you're designing the slides, keep track of the slides you use. And so, there's slide number 43 and slide number 44 and slide number 45. Have those line up with the screen numbers from BranchTrack. And that way, when you export them and you say export every slide, you say, yep, every slide I want to export, you now have a bunch of JPEGs that'll say slide 23, slide 24, slide 25, and then you can so easily, it just takes a second to bring all of those slides into the exact right thing. And I tell you, I do this all the time, and I never make a mistake. It's so easy to do it that way. So the only power tip here is use the same slide number as the screen number, and it's effortless thing. The other nice thing about PowerPoint, certainly in this case, is it was incredibly easy. It was a one-to-one swap out to go from that to that. And so literally, I did not change the demand curve. I did not change the text. I just used, I just cut and paste, every single time this big blocky truck appeared, I put that truck in there, and then I could cut and paste the line very easily. So PowerPoint does give you an incredible ability to change a bunch of things, like the graphics. If this is the olden days, to change the graphics from 2D to 3D, I'd have to bring back the artist or hire a new artist or something incredibly painful. Instead, this just simply took a few hours to change all of the graphics from one completely different look to another, and then re-upload them, and it was a very, very painless process.
Yeah, and one quick comment on displaying changes and tracking markup, like Microsoft Word does. This is something that's coming to BranchTrack. One of the things we're working on, so that if you're editing a certain scenario multiple times, you can actually track changes properly, almost like in Google Docs or Microsoft Word. So that's really important, because scenarios are essentially all about Word and creative writing.
Yep. So then the final step is then creating the introduction to the lab. You play off with the character, and you play off with the with the drinks. A really important thing for me was to have a consistent numbering thing. So every time the 1 is there, it's lower. Every time the 2 is there, it's raised, as long as there's an option. And the sun was always a 3 to come out, was always that. Wait for clouds. Got it. So, so then here in the final sim, you hit OK. And what's nice about this is these 3 options are always the same. It plays incredibly smoothly. 2, as long as there's an option, 2 is always raised, so I can sit there and raise 2, 2, 2. 3 is always a toggle between sun and clouds. 1 is always lower. And people actually really had fun just doing that. They thought a lot of people just sort of had, a lot of people just had fun clicking between those. You didn't see that, did you? Okay. So in this thing again, here's it's a total consistency. 1 always lowers, 2 always raises, and 3 is always wait for clouds, and so or toggles between set and cloud. So that kind of consistency of the interface was really important. All right, go back to my slides. Again, idiot. I am. All right. So yeah, I'm a tech guy. So anyway, so it's so then the introduction to the lab, adding the people and the characters, and so it ended up with, you know, this entire sim, and I hope you play it, was 51 screens altogether. So it's just, you know, it's not a huge deal. It's a very finite number, and that's why I chose it as an example. I've gone up to around 230. Beyond that, it gets really cumbersome, gives you a headache. But you know, a lot of the sims I do is between 50 and 100 screens, so it's not a huge deal. It's easy to swap things out if you do. I always have a war on words in terms of having as few as possible. Again, a consistent interface is really important. In this case, the 1, 2, and 3 for raise, lower, and switch. And again, a tone that's as sort of, you know, helpful and pleasant as possible. I don't like yelling at the player unless they do something really, really stupid. But kind of having that general sense of engagement. The last thing I do want to just mention, though, is what I started off with, which is this is an open-ended field. Even though people can look at this as a constraint, this is like a word processor, and you can do anything you want in it. You can create complex scenes and really deep interactions. In this case, you know, you can do a walkthrough and try to understand a function. In this case, you have 2 buttons. You know, yes, this box shows the revenue, or no, this box doesn't. You can toggle through them, and so you can allow people to have all different kinds of interactivity. You're really only limited by your imagination in terms of what kinds of interactivity can you have, as long as you keep the interface simple. But that does not mean, but you can have incredibly interesting and intuitive and fun and sneaky ways of showing that. You can have sandboxes and create, you know, you can create full sims of sims. You can create full little interactive worlds that behave in ways that feel very, very customized. You can have, you know, theoretical concepts and conversations. So the open-endedness of it is extraordinary. You really are, you know, the one reason why I did everything in PowerPoint with all clip art is my own goal, internal goal, was to say, how can I figure out a way that allows a tremendous amount of fun and interactivity and charm, if possible, and pedagogical value, but in a way that no one can not do. I mean, anyone can throw clip art together. Anyone can sort of play through this kind of stuff. And so it's very important to me, and you know, to have a model that, most importantly, can be where someone can design content at, roughly speaking, the same speed that other educational content is developed, whether it's words or pictures or film strips or something. And so, you know, now simulations become accessible to everyone, and now simulations become, you know, just another easy, or not easy, but you know, straightforward tool in the toolbox, not this big, expensive, complicated thing that becomes a whole different beast. Last question, Sergey?
Well, thank you so much. This was incredible. We do have a couple of questions left. Well, it's actually one question and one comment from me. So someone asked about APIs and data and analytics and results and insights. Yes, we have an API. Yes, we have a great data platform that you can build upon. So you can drill down to specific answers of specific learners, or you can look at averages. What's the average time to make a certain choice in a certain scenario, or how many people chose this path as compared to people who chose that path, and so on. So we have all that, but the real question is that someone else asked, like, what kind of results are you tracking in your scenarios, and what results do you expect from scenarios? What data you're interested in, or maybe you're not tracking it at all? So can you talk about this? I think it's a good question to conclude this. So after the scenario is done, what results are you expecting, and what are you results are you tracking?
I mean, it's the same as tracking any learning experience. Some people do it very hard. Some people do it not at all. And so there's nothing unique or special about short sims in terms of tracking, with the exception exactly what Sergey said, which is you can track everything down to the millisecond. In terms of these ones for the Gates Foundation, we're tracking at a very meta level of number of students who signed up for a class versus number of students who passed with a C or higher. So people who started the class, who stuck with the class, who didn't drop out, who completed all the work, and who passed the class. And of course, the short sim was one part, but not but only one part of the textbooks compared to people who were doing textbooks that were more traditional. And there's this, it was like something along the lines of like 67% of the people using a traditional online textbook passed the class who signed up for it versus I think 74 or 75. It's around that. It was about a 10% difference between people who signed up for the class and passed with a C or higher. So from a college perspective, it's a very, very big deal. And it was nice because it took away a lot of the differences between Pell Grant students and non-students. In other words, people who were not necessarily served by traditional education did not have any difference than other people who were perhaps better students. So, that's one thing that we're very, very proud about. Different corporations have totally different metrics, and so there's no one big universal thing in terms of engagement and in terms of assessments. So far I can say generically we've been very happy with the results, but in terms of rigorous assessment, I'll have to leave that to sort of more other people. The other thing one thing that I look at a lot, which is stupid, but I still do, is how many times a person engages a sim after they get the answer right. And it tends to be, they play it typically 2 or 3 times and then they get the right answer, and they still play it 2 or 3 times after that. So for me, I view that as a real success in terms of engagement and interest and finding it both a worthwhile and an enjoyable experience. So from a short-term perspective, I'm really happy with that heuristic. But I think the short answer is, however you measure any learning engagement, you'll probably be able to do more effectively through this tool.
Thank you so much, and please don't hesitate to reach out to us if you want to talk about anything of that in more detail. If you want a personal demo, or you want to be invited to one of our future webinars and so on, please reach out to either hello@branchtrack.com or Sergey@branchtrack.com. I can make an introduction for you and Clark. Please visit www.shortsims.com, which is the website for Clark Aldrich Designs. And we will share this recording, and we'll share more examples. Now, before we wrap up this amazing webinar, I'm really happy with everything we've done today. I want to launch a very quick poll or two. So one is a very simple question. So if you have any content that you would like to share in a similar manner, if it's ever reachable, the coolness of this particular webinar, please let us know. We'll reach out. We know who said yes and no, so we'll reach out personally. And maybe you want to share something in private with us, discuss it, or maybe we can help you build a case for that, and so on. So if you want to be on stage in our series of webinars, please let us know.
It's hell. I just gotta admit, it's awful. Don't do it. Just kidding.
And the yes ratio just dropped like 10% points.
I have that effect on people.
Yeah. All right. So we have about 60% voting turnout. Well, it's better than we did in November, or rather, you did. 67. Right, I'm going to give it another 10 seconds, and then I'm closing this poll. And the final poll will be an even simpler question. It's please rate our webinar. So Did you like that? If you like that, we'll compare it to our other webinars and we'll try to do more of this content. If you have any suggestions or comments, please reach out to us at hello@branchtrack.com or sergey@branchtrack.com. If you want to get in touch with Clark, www.shortseams.com. And thank you. That's been a great session, great turnout, and thank you, Clark. This has been an excellent webinar, one of the best I've seen, and I've learned a lot. I'm supposed to know something about scenarios, but I've learned a ton. This is a great insight into how real scenarios are made and great tricks, and it's really, really useful. Thank you so much.
Pleasure. Thank you.